The sidewalk outside CBGB smelled like stale beer, cigarette smoke, and broken dreams. November 1982, and the Bowery wasn't romantic. It was dangerous, desperate, a place where junkies nodded off in doorways and police sirens were the neighborhood's lullaby. 19-year-old Marcus Chen sat against the club's graffiti-covered wall, shivering despite his father's oversized leather jacket, staring at the guitar case open before him. Inside that case was a 1968 Fender Stratocaster, sunburst finish, with cigarette burns on the headstock and a crack running through the pickguard. It had been played at the Fillmore East, at Max's Kansas City, at every dive bar that mattered in New York's downtown scene. It had belonged to Marcus's father, Jimmy Chen, a session guitarist who'd worked with everyone from the Velvet Underground to Patti Smith, always in the background, always uncredited, always essential. Jimmy had died 3 months earlier from a heart attack at 51 while carrying groceries up 5 flights of stairs. One moment complaining about the broken elevator, the next moment Marcus's mother was screaming for help that came too late. Jimmy Chen was gone before the ambulance arrived. He'd never been famous, would never be remembered in any hall of fame, but he'd been there. When the Velvet Underground needed someone who could play hypnotic riffs that Lou Reed demanded, Jimmy had been in the studio. When Patti Smith was recording early demos, Jimmy's guitar had been there, uncredited, unpaid sometimes, but present. Marcus had the cardboard sign propped against the case, written in his father's old Sharpie. Guitar for sale, $300, serious buyers only. $300 was what his mother calculated they needed to avoid eviction. 2 months behind on rent, and the landlord had made it clear. Pay by December 1st or get out. Marcus's mother worked 14-hour shifts at a garment factory in Chinatown, fingers bleeding from industrial sewing machines. She barely made enough to eat. The rent was impossible. Marcus had tried everything, applied for jobs that slammed doors before they opened, sold his father's record collection piece by piece, even tried busking, but winter cold made his fingers stiff and the money was pathetic. Hours had passed and nobody had stopped. A few punk kids had looked, laughed when Marcus refused to go lower. One guy offered $50 and weed. Another tried to grab the guitar and run. Marcus had been faster, nearly getting into a fight before the guy wandered off. The tears wanted to come, but Marcus wouldn't let them. His father had taught him better. Jimmy Chen had survived being one of the few Asian musicians in a predominantly white rock scene. He'd survived prejudice, poverty, invisibility. Survival meant not showing weakness. But sitting there on that freezing sidewalk, Marcus felt himself breaking anyway. Before we continue with what happened next, if you're finding value in these untold Lou Reed stories, please subscribe to the channel. These narratives take extensive research and are rarely told elsewhere. The encounter happened at 4:17 in the afternoon. Lou Reed came around the corner from 2nd Avenue, walking alone. By 1982, Reed was established enough that walking alone in the Bowery could mean harassment, but he'd always been defiant about maintaining his ability to just walk his city without handlers turning him into some protected celebrity artifact. Black leather jacket, dark jeans, black boots, sunglasses even though the sun was fading. His hair was dark, cut short, and there was something in the way he moved that suggested both confidence and deep exhaustion, like a man who'd survived wars nobody else could see. He almost didn't see Marcus, almost walked right past. But something made him stop. Maybe the Stratocaster, maybe the kid's face, that particular expression Reed recognized because he'd worn it himself once, many years ago. Reed walked over and stood there looking down, saying nothing. Marcus looked up and saw a man in sunglasses and leather, someone who looked vaguely familiar, but Marcus couldn't place him. "That's a nice Stratocaster," Reed said, his voice flat, that distinctive Lou Reed monotone. Marcus scrambled to his feet. "Yes, sir. 1968. Original finish? Somewhere, but it plays perfectly. My father took really good care of it." Reed crouched down and opened the case wider. He picked up the Stratocaster carefully, played it acoustically, a few notes, a chord progression, testing the instrument, feeling its response, reading its history through touch. When Reed finished, he placed the guitar back carefully and looked up at Marcus. "Your old man was a musician," Reed said. Not a question. "Session player," Marcus said quickly. "He worked all over downtown. Underground stuff, mostly. He was really good." "Was," Reed repeated, catching the past tense. Marcus felt his throat tighten. "Heart attack 3 months ago. Just dropped dead carrying groceries. He was only 51. Reed was quiet, still crouched there, something shifting in his posture. Then he took off his sunglasses, and Marcus found himself looking into Lou Reed's eyes. Dark, tired, with lines that spoke of decades of late nights and survival. "What was your father's name?" Reed asked quietly. "Jimmy Chen. He did session work. You probably never heard of him." But something flickered across Reed's face. Recognition. He stood up slowly. "Jimmy Chen played guitar on some Velvet Underground sessions. 67, 68. We needed someone who could do repetitive figures for hours without getting bored. Your father did that. He was professional. Just served the music." Marcus felt the sidewalk drop away. "You're Lou Reed." "Last time I checked," Reed said with a slight smile. "So why are you selling your father's guitar?" The story poured out. The heart attack, medical bills, lost income, his mother's 14-hour factory shifts, the eviction notice, the $300 they needed, or they'd be on the street. Marcus talked about selling his father's records, about busking until his fingers bled. Reed just stood there, listening with complete attention. When Marcus finished, Reed was quiet. Then he spoke, voice softer, more personal. "When I was 17, my parents had me committed to a psychiatric hospital. They were afraid because I was different. So they had doctors strap me to a table and run electricity through my brain. Electroshock therapy. They called it treatment. I called it torture." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "The thing about that experience is, it taught me that family can hurt you worse than strangers. But your father didn't hurt you. Your father gave you something. He gave you music. He gave you this guitar. And you're about to throw that away for $300. "I don't have a choice," Marcus said, voice breaking. Reed reached into his jacket and pulled out his wallet. He counted out bills quickly until he had $300. He held it out to Marcus. "Take it." Marcus stared. "But the guitar." "Is staying with you," Reed interrupted. "The money's a gift. Or call it payment for your father's session work that never got credited. But you're keeping the guitar." "I can't accept this," Marcus said, shaking his head, tears blurring his vision. "Stop," Reed said sharply. "Don't tell me what you deserve. I'm interested in keeping music alive." He pressed the money into Marcus's hand with force. "Listen very carefully. That guitar isn't wood and wire. That's your father's voice. That's every session he played, every note he taught you. When you play that guitar, your father's there. Not metaphorically. Actually there, because music doesn't die when musicians die. Music is the only thing that survives us. Reed paused, making sure Marcus was listening. Your father played on Velvet Underground sessions. That means somewhere in those records, his fingers are moving. His music is immortal. He passed that to you. If you sell this guitar because you're scared, you're killing that immortality. You're silencing your father's voice, and I'm not going to let that happen. Marcus was crying now. Deep shaking sobs from 3 months of suppressed grief. Reed stood there awkwardly, then put his hand on Marcus's shoulder and squeezed once. Go ahead, cry it out. This is the Bowery. We've all seen worse. That's when someone recognized Reed. A punk kid gasped. Holy shit, that's Lou Reed. The atmosphere changed. People moved closer, voices rising. Reed straightened up, raising one hand. Everyone stay where you are. Just having a private conversation. Not a show. But the crowd kept growing. Reed turned back to Marcus one last time. You keep that guitar. You play it every single day. And when you play, remember your father's listening. He wants to hear what you've learned. You understand? Why are you doing this? Marcus asked. Reed considered the question. Because nobody did it for me. When I was broken and scared, nobody gave me what I needed most. So now, when I can, I give it to someone else. That's how we stay human. The crowd pressed closer. Reed gave Marcus one last look. Then he was moving, walking quickly through the crowd, not stopping, just moving with that particular Lou Reed energy. Marcus stood there, $300 clutched in his hand, his father's Stratocaster still in its case, and his entire world transformed. That night, Marcus went home to the tiny Chinatown apartment where his mother hunched over bills. When Marcus put the $300 on the table, she froze. Marcus, she said slowly in Mandarin, where did this money come from? Marcus told her everything. The man in leather, the things he said, how he was Lou Reed. His mother's face cycled through disbelief, shock, and finally relief so profound she started crying. She pulled Marcus into her arms. Your father would be so proud. That night, for the first time since his father's death, Marcus opened the Stratocaster case. He lifted out the guitar and played. His fingers were stiff. He missed notes, fumbled chords, but he played. And as he played, he heard it. What Lou Reed had been talking about. His father was actually there, in the muscle memory, in the instinctive chord voicings, in the phrasing that matched Jimmy Chen's exactly. Music doesn't die. The story spread through New York's downtown music scene. A journalist tracked Marcus down, wanting to write a feature. Marcus declined, feeling that publicizing Reed's act would betray it. But about 6 weeks later, Marcus's mother received a call from Lou Reed's management. An education fund had been established, $5,000 for Marcus's music education, guitar lessons, theory classes, equipment, whatever he needed. The representative made it clear Reed had specifically demanded no publicity, no press releases, no photo opportunities, just help, given quietly. Marcus used the fund to study jazz guitar at the new school, learning from musicians who'd played with everyone from Charlie Parker to John Coltrane. He practiced 8, 10, sometimes 12 hours a day, driven by something that felt like obligation, like debt, like a promise. By 1989, Marcus Chen was 26 and working as a session guitarist, following exactly in his father's footsteps. He played on underground albums, did backup work, became part of that invisible infrastructure of professional musicians. It wasn't glamorous. His name rarely appeared in credits, but it was honest work. Then one afternoon, he got a call about a session. Lou Reed was recording his New York album, needed additional guitar work, specifically wanted session players who understood the city's sound. Was Marcus available? Marcus showed up with his father's Stratocaster, still bearing the cigarette burns and cracked pickguard. When Lou Reed walked in, he looked exactly the same and completely different. 7 years older, grayer, but still wearing black leather, still wearing sunglasses indoors. Reed didn't recognize Marcus at first. He glanced at Marcus, gave a small nod, then turned to discuss technical requirements. Marcus sat up while Reed and the engineer talked. Then Reed turned to Marcus. "Let's hear what you can do. I need something that sounds like the Bowery at 4 in the morning. Desperate but defiant." "I know exactly what you're talking about," Marcus said quietly. Marcus started playing, not showing off, just playing the language his father had taught him, filtered through 7 years of education. He played phrases that sounded like sirens and streetlights and subway trains. When Marcus finished, Reed was staring at him. "That's a nice Stratocaster. Looks familiar." "It should," Marcus said, heart pounding. "It's the one you saved 7 years ago. Outside CBGB. You gave a 19-year-old kid $300 and told him to keep his father's guitar." Reed went completely still. Recognition flooded his face. He took off his sunglasses. "Marcus, Jimmy Chen's kid. I've been trying to thank you for 7 years," Marcus said. "You saved my family. You saved my music." Reed looked uncomfortable. "You don't have to thank me. I just did what made sense." "But most people don't," Marcus said. "You did. And I play this guitar every day, just like you told me to. You were right. When I play, my father's there." Reed cleared his throat, looking away. "So you're a session player now, following in your old man's footsteps?" "Trying to." Reed smiled slightly. "If that's how you play at 26, your father would be proud as hell. Now let's make some music." For the next 6 hours, they worked. Not Lou Reed, the legend, and some session musician. Just two guitarists who understood that music was the only language that really mattered. They played, and somewhere in that recording, Marcus Chen's fingers moved alongside Lou Reed's, just like his father's fingers had moved on those Velvet Underground sessions 22 years earlier. 3 generations of musicians, connected by sound, by survival, by the refusal to let the music die. In 2013, Marcus Chen was 50. He'd spent 3 decades in music, played on hundreds of albums, taught guitar to neighborhood kids, passed forward what had been passed to him. When Lou Reed died on October 27th, Marcus heard the news on the radio while walking through the East Village. He stopped and cried publicly for the first time since his father's death. Not because he'd known Reed well, but because Reed had given him permission to keep his father's voice alive. The memorial concert was held at the Apollo Theater. When organizers reached out to session players who'd worked with Reed, Marcus said yes immediately. He walked onto that stage with his father's Stratocaster, now 45 years old, still bearing the cigarette burns and cracked pickguard. The theater was packed with people whose lives had been touched by Lou Reed's music. Marcus didn't make a speech. He just played. A song his father had started composing before his death. A melody Jimmy Chen had hummed while cooking dinner. Marcus had finished the composition, adding harmonies and structure. The song started quiet, a bluesy progression that spoke of immigrant struggle, of working-class survival, of being invisible in a city that only saw you when it wanted to exploit you. Then Marcus's additions came in. building towards something that felt like resolution, like peace. The audience listened in profound silence. When the song ended, the theater erupted. People standing, some crying, recognizing something that touched survival and loss and the invisible threads connecting generations. After the performance, musicians approached Marcus backstage. People who'd known Reed, who'd been helped by him in ways both public and private. Marcus understood then that his story wasn't unique. Reed had helped dozens of people, maybe hundreds, always quietly, always with the same message. Keep the music alive. Don't let it die. Pass it forward. Today, in a community music center in Manhattan's Chinatown, there's a photograph on the wall. A man in leather and sunglasses standing next to a young musician holding a Stratocaster. Below it, a plaque reads, Marcus Chen and Lou Reed, 1982, the day the music was saved. And below that, in both English and Chinese, music doesn't die. It just keeps playing, generation to generation, teacher to student, musician to musician. Every student who enters sees the photograph and understands. Someone helped, someone cared. Someone believed that keeping music alive mattered more than money or fame. Because of that belief, kids who can't afford guitars have guitars. Kids who would never have lessons get them. The music doesn't die. It just keeps playing. And sometimes, late at night when the building is empty, you can hear it. A blues progression. A father teaching his son. A legend helping someone he didn't know. A Stratocaster that refused to be silenced. The music doesn't die. It never has. It never will.